Why is it that they are more susceptible to use and abuse of substances like hard drugs than adults? Why are they easily influenced into crime, easily influenced into risky behavior? We are subject to a couple of things. Number one is our biology. Your genes makes you vulnerable to certain things, makes you strong and resilient to other things. This thing also happens to adults anyway. So how come adults are not as susceptible as children or adolescents to influences that are negative, even positive? An adult will say, well, yeah, I would love to do this. However, these are the consequences. I may get into trouble with the law. I may get into trouble with the police. I may get into trouble with my employer. But the child whose executive part of the brain is not that developed may not be able to analyze and come to conclusions on the actions to be taken, like the adult or the child who has a better developed executive function. And therein lies the problem. Yeah, now there's a question a couple of people keep asking me. How come young people, teenagers, children are more susceptible to peer pressure than adults? Why is it that they are more susceptible to use and abuse of substances like hard drugs than adults? Why are they easily influenced into crime, easily influenced into risky behavior and stuff like that? Well, there are many reasons. We are subject to a couple of things. Number one is our biology. Your genes makes you vulnerable to certain things, makes you strong and resilient to other things. And then, of course, your experiences as you grow up, it forms your prison. It forms a construct, a window through which you look at the world and interpret things. And then the circumstances of that particular point in time all come together. But this thing also happens to adults anyway. So how come adults are not as susceptible as children or adolescents to influences that are negative, even positive, depending on the case how you look at it? Now, the reason is that our brain, our central nervous system develops as we grow up, right? Right from when we were a fetus in the womb, we are born, and then it begins to grow. And it grows at a very rapid pace. But you see, it keeps growing. Even though we say you're an adult at 18, many countries say you're an adult at 18. Some are pushing now to 21. But the truth is, you are still maturing. You are still developing, even up to well into your 20s. Studies have shown that. So now, what is the problem? Usually, you receive sensations and sensory inputs into your brain through certain pathways. In anatomy, we say the posterior pathway, and let us say through the back. So they are called afferents. Now, you send messages for actions and behavior through the anterior part, which is what we call efferents. So now, you have all these sensory sensations coming in from everywhere, your skin, your eyes, your whatever, internal, external. But you see, these things are filtered and modulated through different parts of the brain. There is a part of the brain where decisions, logic, reasoning, ethics, morals, that's where it is seated. And it's called the executive function. It's towards the front part of the brain, right in front of your eyes, in your forehead here. The so-called executive part of the brain, prefrontal cortical area. Now, unfortunately, that's the last part of the brain in terms of development. So you see your sensory input areas are fully developed. So you get all the sensation an adult gets, all the inputs an adult gets. But the part of the brain that decides, that analyzes, that looks at the data is not that developed. So the consequences of actions are not as well analyzed and judged as the adult would, or the child who has a better developed part of the executive part of the brain. That's why it's called the executive function part of the brain. Because, you know, in an establishment, for example, management staff are called executives. Why are they called top executive? Because they take the decisions, they drive policy for the organization. They are managers. Then the lower to middle level are operational staff who carried out the instructions and directives from the top. So that part of the brain is your executive part. It's the manager of your brain. It is where logic, rules, regulations, ethics, everything sits and the decisions are made. That's why it's the executive part of the brain. Okay? So now, if you have all these sensations, all these inputs coming in, do this, do that, impulses coming in, an adult will say, well, yeah, I would love to do this. However, these are the consequences. I may get into trouble with the law. I may get into trouble with the police. I may get into trouble with my employer. But the child whose executive part of the brain is not that developed may not be able to analyze and come to conclusions, the proper conclusion, appropriate conclusions on the actions to be taken, like the adult or a child who has a better developed executive function. And therein lies the problem. So they are more easily influenced, therefore, compared to adults. So we must understand this when we are dealing with kids, when we are dealing with adolescents or young people. However, there's a caveat, because it shouldn't be, you see, development, we have an average that we give. We say, oh, a child by 3 months should be able to sit with our support. At 9 months to a year, should be able to stand with our support, be able to walk, talk. That's the average. When you take a sum of 100 children, we are saying that over 70-80% will fit into this category. But you are going to find a few who, 5%, 10%, who started walking even before 9 months for whatever reason. And then the other way around too. You have some kids at 1 year, they are still needed, they are not standing without support yet. Okay? So you have that. So in the same way, even though we say children at 18, at 20, at 15, their executive part of the brain is not as developed as the adult, there will be some who are even better developed, maybe operating at 30 years of chronological age versus their mental age. Perhaps it's up. So we are looking at the average, because people have said, oh, but I know some kids I know some adults who behave like kids. Of course, there are some adults who are apparently stuck in a particular area. So now, but that part of the brain I'm talking about, experiences, contributes a lot. And it's not just about development or maturation. Okay, it's about knowledge and skills built up. So that part of the brain is also called the knowing part of the brain. The doing part of the brain, rather, where the part that brings in signals is the knowing part of the brain. So the children may know as much as you do as an adult, but the doing part is where the difference is. Indeed, people have said that, children with ADHD have a split between the connection from the knowing and the doing part of the brain. They know what to do, but they can't stop themselves from not doing or doing. And so they're all over the place. That's why they're impulsive. Again, there are adults who are impulsive too. They're as impulsive as some children. I'd be wondering, how can a man do this at your age? Why are you behaving like that? So there's a defect in the maturation or the development or the movement in his executive function part? So these are things you can ruminate about.